Hey there, welcome to the Reinsurance Podcast, the place where we dive into all things reinsurance, the coolest part of insurance. We're your hosts, Jerad and Ben, a couple of ex-practitioners who loved the industry so much we founded Supercede to tackle some of its biggest headaches. And we're here to share our insights and stories with expert guests as we uncover what's really going on in the industry.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a special news episode where we look back on the month of July. How are you, Jerad?
Recorded. I'm very good. Recorded remotely, so I don't get to do my do. There's so much more action in the studio. But alas, the news does not stop for anybody. So here we are.
No, indeed.
Wrapping up
And
July.
not even in these sweltering July conditions, where in the UK it's finally gone above 22 degrees.
Exactly. Sunshine for the fourth day all summer. But we'll kick off, I think, with what is seeming to be like the biggest cyber news story we've had maybe ever, was this CrowdStrike outage, which brought industries to their knees. I was in the United States when this happened, but people missing flights everywhere. Like this was a huge event from a cyber perspective. Just beginning to kick off, but we're still grappling with what is going to happen to the insurance and then subsequently the reinsurance sector as we sort of evaluate what the losses sort of turn into.
Yeah, it feels to me a bit like when we had the pandemic and we had all those business interruption policies, and you had such a broad event in scope that wasn't really well imagined by the underlying policies, and the result was that nobody's quite sure exactly what's going to happen now that an event has actually occurred, whether people will be able to claim, and as you said, the extent to which that will affect reinsurance as well. So we currently wait, but we've seen numbers coming out, haven't we? We've seen sort of in the region of 2 billion total industry loss expected. I think I've seen that number around, which is big for cyber, but manageable for the industry, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing they're saying. It's like they feel like that the impact is going to be severe on the industry. Maybe that's in a correction severity measure, but more than almost 30% of people feel that it will be manageable, right? Ren and Fortitude Re and Marsh are all sort of saying this will be a manageable sort of loss. So the knock-on effect will be maybe some more significant.
Yeah, and I'm actually very curious to see how actual industry companies look at this from their own IT perspective as well, because as a CIO or like a CTO in the insurance world, this is exactly the kind of thing you're worried about happening to your company, right? A big supplier for you or a critical piece of your infrastructure goes down and then the whole thing falls over. Maybe goes to show just how much bits of our critical infrastructure around the world is a Jenga tower waiting to fall over. And meanwhile, obviously, we've had boards pretty much focused recently at the big companies like the Microsofts, the Googles, etc., on the race for Gen AI, not so much on making sure the lights stay on and that everything else is working well with the general services, which sort of continue ticking along. All of the attention, all the investor calls have been about who's winning the race for this new artificially intelligent era. I wonder whether this will sort of reset the scope a bit back to, but we also can't allow, all of our core customers, businesses, and infrastructure to fall apart whilst we're chasing the dream.
Yeah. This pursuit of racing to do things feels incongruous with people's desire to be like just stable and make sure it all works every day.
Like Mercedes Formula One team is winning the races, but all of their regular cars are crashing into walls.
Exactly. But then sort of leaning into this further, Chaucer's come out and said in 2023, cyber attacks against UK utility companies were up more than 500, almost 600%. Again, like core infrastructure being under attack, which we've now seen is actually possibly more vulnerable than we would hope. And that's not reassuring, right? If you have these things happening and an increase in attack on core systems, there's certainly some danger that's being had there.
But look, I wrote a cool poem.
Cool. So moving from cyber into the major classes, one of the things we've talked about a lot is as conditions improve for reinsurers, will we see a spike in sort of new reinsurance entrants, a new class of reinsurers? And AM Best is coming out here saying like, not yet, right? We've seen some people trying to get involved, but we're not seeing a new class, despite the best returns since 1993. So still waiting to see if that will happen. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think we've got maybe a couple of exceptions where some capacity will emerge. Some Lloyd's syndicates recently. We've had Alpine Re as well. Sort of making headway and getting something arranged. We've seen capital flowing into the industry, but at the moment it seems to be going either to ILS or to incumbents who are sort of bolstering the really strong positions they already have to offer reinsurance to the industry. I think you made a really good point on this when we were chatting earlier today, that there's not been a enabler that lets that class of would-be 2024, let's say, step up and serve a market that couldn't be served before. There's still a market, and it's relatively, homogenous, you might argue. And it's a case of, at the moment, we've got a relatively small number of key capital providers who can just be very choosy about who they want to do business with. There's not sort of a group crying out for, perhaps as there was in '93. If only we understood catastrophe models, we could start writing this business. We haven't got that enabler this time, or that particular problem to solve. So it's probably literally just a case of, how do these firms make themselves appealing to the capital providers to get deals done?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. That it's not just the financial conditions, right? There's a lot of other elements that sit behind this. The introduction of models in the early 1990s had a transformational impact on capital being able to support catastrophe risk, especially in sort of high risk zones. And you had the capital conditions off the back of that to sort of partner up to introduce a wave of new class of reinsurers. Namely, which is the next conversation here, RenRe, whose CEO has come out now being like, this is a super exciting and profitable time to be a reinsurer. Obviously,
what a time to be alive.
You've got great conditions. You've got, as you just pointed out, you have new capital that wants to get into the market, looking at maybe the best way to deploy capital into reinsurance is to put it into the hands of the experts who have a very, very effective way to write this business, be profitable with it. And I think Ren is continuing to lead on a number of those fronts as well.
Absolutely. We'll watch this space for class of 25 maybe, but it would be very interesting. We're 6 weeks away from Monte Carlo at this point, so I'm sure there will be many statements made, much posturing done by all the different parties as to what 1/1/2025 is going to be like then.
Yeah. Moving into political appointments, let's say. So we've got the UK Labour government has come in, and they believe there's going to be a real impact on earnings and capital for UK insurers and reinsurers. Have you been able to look into some of these things? What are your thoughts at a very high level, at early days still, but waiting to see what happens here?
I think sort of the general message for the UK specifically is it's been quite a stable and orderly, if we bring back that word, change in government, because it's been a expected result now for such a long time that the markets had already priced in everything that was going to happen, and the change in leadership wasn't especially different in terms of policy measures. So yeah, we'll see whether there are some specific classes that maybe get some benefit or some difference in the way they work. But I don't think that there's anything that's going to materially affect the insurance and reinsurance industry out of the gates here from the change of government in the UK. More interestingly, perhaps, to turn the question back to you, new nominee in the US presidential race, Biden obviously stepping back out. That could make things very interesting as we look towards the US at the end of this year.
It's going to shake some things up as we go into the end of this year. Very different positions on sort of capital and how they back up big institutions and banks and the financial sectors more broadly. A lot of uncertainty in that one. And as we've talked about before, the US market can really swing what happens globally. So it feels like there's a lot sort of teetering on what happens in November here. So we'll certainly wait and see. But going back to sort of very expected appointments and results, the CII has welcomed a few new board members, including everyone's favorite reinsurance expert, Ben Rose. Congratulations, sir.
Oh, thank you very much. I'm excited that we have the chance to sort of double down on a mission to make this industry more professional. On one hand, making sure everyone's very well qualified and follows the right professional standards. At the same time, making sure that those people, those practitioners, are equipped with the best possible technology. So, yeah, it's a very well-aligned role and mission that we're working on.
Yeah, I think the appointment of yourself is super important in terms of bringing a younger voice to the table, as always appreciated, as well as a voice of what is the role technology will play across the industry, and how can we move to champion change and help the industry get to that point that we all sort of are aspiring to achieve. So super exciting stuff there, and we'll work accordingly and provide updates across that as we go in deeper there. And then the last thing, on circling back to technology, on things that continue to be a thing, maybe a resurgence possibly of tokenization on reinsurance contracts. Have you seen this?
I've heard whispers.
So Cayman-based reinsurer Oxbridge Re has a Web3 focused subsidiary called Insurance Plus, and they're beginning to sort of try to rebuild this idea that you should put reinsurance contracts back onto the blockchain, working alongside like Ripple and PwC to tokenize reinsurance contracts. A lot of things we touched on and went through discussing B3I and the industry's blockchain initiatives in the past. I don't know if we can handle more buzzwords. We're already sort of AI heavy now. Can we get back into blockchain too? It'll be to be determined from my perspective, but one we can keep an eye on. We can watch and see if it gains momentum this time around.
Yeah, we watch this space with dread and excitement in equal measure.
There should be a word. Is trepidation the word that syncs these things up? I'm not. But that is the news for July. As you say, we are very, very quickly approaching Monte Carlo and Baden-Baden instead of conference season. So one more month in front of us, and then it's going to be heavy into the heat of renewal preparations.
Indeed, and I hope that all of our listeners get to enjoy a little bit of the heat of your celebrating Northern Hemisphere summer in this month of August, which in the UK actually has some sunshine, at least today.
Few days here and there, we can appreciate them. Perfect. Thank you, everybody.
See you soon.
Thanks for tuning in to the Reinsurance Podcast. If you enjoyed our show, don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and leave us a review to let us know how we're doing, preferably 5 stars. For more insights and updates, follow us on LinkedIn.